There we go.
Yes, sir.
Off of for a while, and I started presenting on a different number of different topics, from cloud security to network threat hunting and things like that. But recently, over the past month or so, MITRE has brought this back to the forefront as something that is absolutely essential to anybody whenever they're talking about defense and how we can actually do defense correctly moving forward. And the active defense concept, I want to kind of set the stage whenever we're dealing with the legalities of this as we go through this next hour plus talking about active defense and cyber deception. There's a number of cases that you can look at. You can look at Jerome Heckenkamp versus the United States of America, the United States versus Wallet Act. There's a ton of them out there, but this one is my all-time favorite. So in this particular case, Susan Clements Jeffrey was a substitute teacher in Ohio, and she was teaching a class, and she had one of her students come up to her and say, "Hey, would you like to buy a MacBook Pro for $50? And she's thinking to herself, this sounds totally legit and a smoking good deal. So she said, of course. And one of the funny things about this particular case is she actually made the sale with the student at a school bus stop. So of course, this particular notebook computer was stolen, right? It was actually stolen from another school district, okay? She got home and she immediately started using the computer, cyber sexting her boyfriend. And while she was doing that, Absolute Software had like the LoJack type software for tracking a computer, turning on the camera on the computer, gaining access to that computer, all the files. And they started taking multiple pictures of Susan Clements Jeffrey, quote unquote, in various states of undress and sexual activity, which is bad. So she sued. Eventually, Absolute Software settled out of court because they really didn't think that they were going to win this case. But there was a ruling on whether or not the case could even move forward. And the school district and Absolute Software said she had no case whatsoever because the computer system was not her computer. It actually belonged to another school district. And in this case, Judge Walter Rice ruled, it is one thing to have a stolen computer system give its location information or an IP address in an effort to track it down. It is something completely different to violate federal wiretapping laws to do so. So the point is, when I'm talking about these things today, if we want to worry about the legalities of what we're doing in active and engaged defense, if we want to worry about these legalities, we need to make sure that we stay on this bright, shiny line. Judge Walter Rice gave us this line and said IP address and locational information. That's cool. But as soon as we start gaining access to an attacker's computer system, even if they are quote unquote evil attackers, you do not have the right to break the law against lawbreakers. So as I go through today, I'm going to focus a lot on geolocation and IP address as we set this up, okay? So a larger conversation. Anytime I talk about active defense or I talk about cyber deception, it's inevitable that I have someone bring up, well, that's not something that anybody should do. And we have quotes here from people that may disagree with me. Brian Krebs said, deception technologies are nice, but advisable only if your organization is already doing 99% of the rest of basic security stuff. As it happens, a lot of the really cool tech being advertised at RSA is for a very exclusive audience. Then Jeff Moss at a Black Hat conference in Europe said, he basically said, and then I checked the canary. Oh, so he said, I've never heard one speaker say, and then I checked the canary, or then I reviewed the deception tech. Who here is using deception technology? And hardly any of the hands actually raised. I think there was like 4 in the audience. So the belief is that you really shouldn't do deception technology because really no one's doing deception technology, or you shouldn't do deception technology because you should do everything else first. Well, Krebs, we need to have a talk. And by the way, I respect the hell out of Brian Krebs. I'm just kind of, bringing him up here because of something he said, but we have to have a talk. We have to have a talk because if you look at organizations and how they discover that they were in fact breached, and this graph is from the Verizon data breach report from 2 years ago. And the numbers haven't shifted much even since 2013. The vast majority of organizations that were compromised found out they were compromised from external third parties. I've gone through and I've highlighted every single one of the external third parties with little rectangles or red rectangles. And over 67% of the detects that people discovered were from outside of their organization. Were outside of their organization's control. If you're looking in here, you got law enforcement responsible for 3.6. Antivirus is only responsible for 5.7%. Your SIM and log review, 1.3%. So the whole idea that you should get everything else done in security correctly first is fundamentally at its core flawed. And I'll discuss why it's flawed here as we progress throughout this session. But the point is, if you're looking at trying to just use the existing technologies that everyone else is using to try to defend your network, then you're probably going to have a hard time with computer security. So MITRE actually jumped into the fray on this as well. MITRE released the Matrix, and this is predominantly the brainchild of Christina Fowler. And this particular matrix is amazing because MITRE, as they were talking about the matrix and as they were talking about cyber deception, as they were working through the attack matrix from the enterprise side, they realized that a lot of organizations were missing some key points of different attacks and detective capabilities. And MITRE realized that one of the only ways to actually address some of these deficiencies in these organizations' ability to actually detect these attacks was to take an active defense stance. So whenever you're talking about active defense with management or other people at work, it's no longer the rantings of this crazy person at Secure West Virginia that you saw present. You're now talking about something like MITRE that's actually putting their weight behind cyber deception as not just a viable, but a necessary part of security architectures for organizations moving forward. So you see things here like decoy content, decoy credentials, decoy networks, decoy systems. Using that cyber deception, we actually have the ability to change the methodologies and the approach of not just our security architectures, but also the ability to change the approach of the attackers who are trying to break into our computer systems. And that is absolutely essential. So why would we do this? So I have these rants that I give against threat intelligence feeds, and I apologize if you're a huge fan of threat intelligence feeds because you're wrong. If you're looking at traditional threat intelligence feeds, the vast majority of threat intelligence feeds are purchasing and trying to implement blacklisted IPs, blacklisted URLs, blacklisted hashes, and domains of systems. All of these are what we call ephemeral threat intelligence. That means from an intelligence perspective, the attackers may have used those IP addresses, those hashes, those URLs a week ago, a month ago, even a day ago. But it's not what they're using today, right now, to try to break into organizations. Now, looking at threat intel and trying to understand the methodologies and the techniques that adversaries go through, I think has a tremendous amount of value. Unfortunately, the translation between the narrative of the overall attack methodology and the ability for us to translate that into something that's a little bit more quantifiable and actionable is oftentimes lost. So the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, has been doing a great job. And I think that there's a lot of really cool things whenever you review these summaries. And these summaries are excellent threat intelligence sources. But what do people take out of these sources and actually turn into TTPs or indicators of compromises in their environment? If you scroll down, they'll go through and say, well, here's the IP addresses and the domains that these attackers used. This is nice to know if you're doing research on a breach, but trying to be proactive and blocking these is not going to stop an advanced attacker. Advanced companies like TrustedSec and Guardians, Rendition, Core, all of these different companies that are out there, they don't say, well, you know, that company got us because their threat intelligence feeds were great. No. And that's because predominantly these threat intelligence feeds are taking these IP addresses and these URLs and they're turning them into signatures in things like firewalls. What is really great is if you get down here to the bottom, rather than just gathering IP addresses and things of that nature, you actually get into the very techniques and the exploits that are actually being utilized by these attackers. All right. So getting away from just these standard, these are the IP addresses that are used, is incredibly important. And instead, trying to look at how these different techniques are utilizing the MITRE attack technique matrix techniques and making sure that we can detect those is absolutely critical. For example, if we go to MITRE, go to the MITRE attack matrix, these techniques, the number of combinations and permutations of these techniques is almost infinite. But if you look at the individual techniques, they're finite. So if you try to collect all the different APT groups and how they use these different combinations, you're going to be dealing with this insane amount of combinations. But if you look at it and you say, okay, what is our mitigation for lateral movement? You can mitigate and shut down lateral movement in most of the techniques available to an attacker simply by doing network segmentation and turning on your firewalls. By the way, network segmentation is part of MITRE Shield. If you're looking at detecting command and control and data exfiltration, you can take care of a lot of that by doing really solid network traffic analysis, which, by the way, is in the MITRE attack technique matrix for Shield and active defense. So you can see where MITRE looked at what people were doing for trying to implement security, and they're like, okay, yeah, we got it. This is the attack matrix. Okay, so we need to go through and block these IP addresses and we're safe. No, we need to block these hashes and we're safe. No, that is not what they were talking about. But if we can abstract up a little bit, all of a sudden we get very powerful in what we can actually detect. And when you're talking about active defense and cyber deception, you're talking about threat intel, about what's attacking your network right now. Right now. And the theory about this, and why this is important and how this actually changes the attacker's behavior. In the world of social sciences, there's this theory of broken windows. If you have a neighborhood that has lots and lots of broken windows, you'll have criminals that'll be like, well, the ability for law enforcement to stop crime here is low. I'm going to start graffitiing things, or I'm going to start stealing things. The point is, the people that commit crimes tend to commit crimes associated with the perceived risk of that crime. So if they think that there's a really high risk that they're going to get caught, they're probably not going to commit crimes. Now, this is incredibly controversial, especially on its implementation. New York City implemented this in a couple of other cities, and I won't get too much into that. But from a psychological perspective, it's absolutely true that when criminals believe that there is a higher risk to an activity, an illegal activity, their likelihood of doing that illegal activity goes down. The other thing I want to get across is when you're looking at nation state level attackers, they generally have one rule: don't get caught. I know this because I've done this for the intelligence community, I've done this for law enforcement, I've done this for DoD, and that is pretty much the big rule that they always come back to. It's like, oh, by the way, when you're setting up these servers, make sure it's not attributed, don't get caught. They might come and kill you and your family in your sleep. Have fun, toodles. Don't get caught. You don't want to burn a true TTP. You can burn the individual hashes, burn the IP addresses, but if you're using a specific technique, tactic, or tool or procedure, then you really want to make sure that you do not get caught at all with what you're doing. So let's try to figure out how we can increase that risk for the attacker, doing real life threat intelligence through active defense, and put the attackers a little bit closer to breaking their one rule. So getting started, I'll spend a lot of time talking about canary tokens, and then I'm going to share with you ADHD and what we can do with the active defense harbinger distribution. I'll do some live demos and show you some stuff as we progress throughout today. So if you're looking at canary tokens, this is by Thinkist, Sharon Mir, and what's his name? I completely forgot. I'll come back to it. But Haroon Mir's company, Thinkist, has a lot of technologies based on honeypots, and they released this wonderful website for free that gives you the ability to create all kinds of attributional technology. If we go to Canary tokens, you can generate the type of token and you can do it on the fly. And let me show you how quick and easy it is. I want to generate a Word document. I put in an email address. I put in a little tag associated with this specific document, create the document, download the document. And now when I open this document up, it pops up and it says enable editing. I'll talk about that more here in just a little bit. There's nothing in it. You can add whatever you want into it. Look at me, Mom, I'm hacking. You can put anything you want into this particular document, easy peasy to do. Go ahead and save it, it doesn't matter. But if I go back to my token and I look at the history of this token, it put a pin right on top of the town I'm attacking, quote unquote, attacking from, which is Spearfish, South Dakota. Resolution's not that great, but later on in this presentation, I will go into some detail about how we can get much better resolution a little bit later. So just sit tight with me for just a few moments. So it's amazing what you can do. So when we're creating these different files, right, we're creating decoy content. Now, if you're going to implement active defense and cyber deception, and you're going to implement it correctly, you need to make sure that you put the content in the proper place that an attacker will actually go. I want you to think of this in terms of hunting. With hunting, you generally don't just go walking around the woods hoping you see something that you're hunting. If you do it correctly, which by the way, there's tons of people that hunt that way, and great. At that point, if you're just walking through the woods, you're not hunting, you're just drinking in the woods with guns. If you are actually hunting, you're going to try to find game trails. You're going to try to find where your prey actually is. You're going to put up game cameras, and you're going to try to watch what time do they show up at this particular point, how do they move, what do they think. Fly fishing's the exact same thing. I desperately want to come back to West Virginia and go fly fishing. I heard you guys have some good fishing out there. And if you're fly fishing, you don't just go up to a river and just start casting. You cast in the right areas, right in front of rocks, right behind rocks. You got little areas with whirlpools and swirls. You're going to be casting in the right places. And when we are talking about cyber deception and active defense, it's no different. We're going to put our attributional technologies and our active defense technologies in the certain places where we expect that attacker to actually go. And the best way to learn how to do this is actually get familiar with attacker tactics and techniques. Take a class on pen testing and how attackers and pen testers move laterally. And as you're watching that class, start to tie together, where can I drop a file? Okay, attackers and pen testers get access to a workstation. They do a password spray. How are we going to detect that password spray? They get on a workstation. They start searching for files with the word password or social security numbers or whatever in it. How do I put in decoy content so when they search for that file, they pull up one of my honey docs? They do website cloning. How can I actually set up attributional technologies when they try to clone my website? I'll be able to detect that somebody has cloned my website, so I can actually react to that. You're putting the content, you're putting the active defense concepts in the right place to actually detect the attacker. So I'd also like to ask you to check out ADHD, the Active Defense Harbinger distribution. I just so happen to have it up and running here. Let me start this up for you. All right, so this is ADHD. There we go. And the Active Defense Harbinger distribution has a wide number of different tools. Some of them, like Honey Badger, that gives you really hyper accurate geolocation information, are installed and ready to go. And the way that we have broken up the Active Defense Harbinger distribution is a lot of the honeypot utilities and the different tools that you would use are broken up as soon as you open the browser. So if you want to learn how to use artillery, you just select artillery and it gives you all the instructions to get trusted sex artillery up and running. You want to use port spoof? Great. Here's step-by-step instructions on how to run port spoof on the distribution. You want to do attribution and do Honey Badger? Great. Here's the instructions to get Honey Badger up and running on this particular distribution. You want to move to full attack? We've got browser exploitation framework, GCAT, ghostwriting, Java web attack, Recon NG, social engineering toolkit, and all the credentials are here. So think of this, you were talking about backtrack at the beginning, John was, and I thought that that was awesome. It's kind of like Kali Linux, but for defenders that are doing active defense. This is a DARPA funded project, and they paid us money at Black Hills Information Security and Secure Ideas to develop this and release it for free. You can absolutely use it if you want. It doesn't cost anything. All the instructions are there. We're trying to reduce the overall barrier for you getting involved in this to make it as cheap and as easy as possible to get started doing cyber deception technologies and active defense. So let's go through some attack methodologies. This is not exhaustive, like at all. I mean, not even close, folks. This is, I just got done literally yesterday teaching a 2-day class for y'all on these things, and there's still more. I actually have a full 6-day class on cyber deception. So there's a lot here, okay? So let's set up a scenario, recon. Whenever you think about what an attacker does, they're gonna go to websites like Shodan, they're gonna go through and they're gonna go to LinkedIn, they're gonna go through and they're gonna try to find out as much about your organization as possible before they even attack your organization. How can we mess with that? There's a number of ways. You can create fake LinkedIn accounts and all kinds of fun things, but I'm gonna focus on one of them. I'm gonna focus on one of them here over this next section. So in AWS, you have these S3 buckets. And these S3 buckets, you can this whole S3 bucket problem is if you're watching the news, there's tons of organizations that are getting compromised via open or insecure S3 buckets, just tons of exploits and tons of things floating around out there that, you know, it's in the news constantly. I'll show you some of these here in just a second. And it's not just attackers that are doing this. A lot of pen testing firms are scouring the internet for open S3 buckets. And when they find it, they go right to Wired or Decipher or some type of internet news magazine. And they're like, oh, I found this. Yeah, it's this weird marketing stunt, but it works for them. So how do we mess with them? What you can do in Canary tokens is you can generate an AWS key token. And you can put this file up somewhere on a web server, in robots.txt somewhere. You could put it up on GitHub, maybe. Put it up on GitHub, and if the attacker is crawling through and seeing what GitHub repositories your company has, they're gonna find these AWS keys and try to authenticate to this AWS S3 bucket. There's nothing there, but as soon as they import this thing into like S3 browser or CyberDuck or whatever tool they're using to try to access S3 buckets, it will automatically generate an alert of exactly where that particular attacker is trying to come from. So this is what the trigger looks like. It just pops up and it says, hey, unable to perform the requested action. Doesn't look like the bucket's there, but on the back end, we get an alert. And it says that the AWS API token key was fired. The specific Canary token gets a random string and a reminder. And then of course, the token type is the AWS keys, and you get the actual source IP address of the attacker that is trying to use this particular S3 bucket. So some context. As I mentioned earlier, attackers love looking for GitHub to find AWS keys. We do this all the time at Black Hills Information Security. If we're trying to break into an organization, sure enough, if they have S3 buckets that are open or keys that we can use, we're going to leverage those to gain access to the environment. It's all about putting this active defense, like little trail of, you know, the breadcrumbs, where an attacker is going to come across them, and then lead them to the point where you can start attributing exactly where they are as an attacker. By the way, could somebody put in the chat the Discord channel? Because I'd like to watch the questions, and I realize I don't have the Discord questions up here. All right, so now let's talk about executables. I'm actually going to create and utilize an executable a little bit later on this morning. We'll show you how we can actually do that. And with that executable, what we're doing is we're creating an executable that as soon as it opens, it's going to beacon back to the defenders, right? So how would you get an attacker to run that particular executable? You could call it vpnconfig.exe. Once again, do a robots.txt entry on a web server, point at a specific directory on that server, and then in that server, you would have indexable directories and then have files, sysprep.exe, number of different ways to get the attacker to run the executable. You can upload any executable you want. You can actually take a real VPN executable. Like let's say, I don't know, Cisco AnyConnect VPN. You can create that executable and you can insert your attributional technologies directly into that executable. So you don't have to just create an executable from scratch with C#, which would be nice, but you can actually insert it into any executable of your choosing. And you want to test this first. Some executables, for some reason, don't work very well at all. Then when it's triggered, you can actually see the DNS resolution callback happens. DNS is not nearly as accurate as a straight HTTP callback, but it can get you in the ballpark of what you're looking for. And we actually have some other ways that you can make executables come back directly to check for like a CRL, for digital code signing certificate. But you know what? You can make this real, folks. This is actually something that's pretty straightforward. For example, an OpenVPN, and you can do the same thing in Windows VPN, Windows VPN. All the different VPNs have the capability of actually inserting checks to validate machines before they're actually allowed onto the network. And then based on the results of those checks, can actually quarantine those systems. So you have this ability to do scripts and execute things on a user's computer that's trying to authenticate to your environment. All you really need to do is set up maybe a trace route where the attacker trace routes from their system to your system. That way you can see if they're using Tor or not, verify their IP address is in fact a real IP address. You could do a wireless site survey. NetSH WLAN show networks mode equals BSSID. Then we get all of the BSSIDs off of that system and their attenuation. We can geolocate where that computer is, sometimes within 20 meters. So there's a lot that you can do that isn't really hacking back. It's not illegal. It's just general security checks that you're already doing for a bunch of your users. We're just tweaking them and feeding that data in differently. So how would you do this? As I mentioned, you can use robots.txt. It basically tells automated web crawlers, things like Googlebot, MSNbot, where they should not index. So you can say user agent star, any of the different crawlers, disallow registration, admin page, JFSF, detect, admin, email, maps, whatever. An attacker will see these directories in robots.txt and will immediately go to those directories. A standard user will never see those directories. So we're basically setting it up so we're not going to have a scenario where your user population is going to stumble upon your deception technology. Going back to hunting, right? You don't want to go hunting in the middle of a mall, right? That's not where your prey is, and it's dangerous. We want to make sure that we're going to put it in a location where the attackers are going to go, but the user population will not go. Next one, cloned website. So a cloned website, one of the methodologies that almost all attackers use is they'll find a website that has a user ID, password, maybe two-factor authentication login, and they will clone that website. And then they will send an email into your organization saying, update your password immediately. You need to log into this portal immediately to update your password. You click the link, it goes to the attacker's website, which looks legit. They enter user ID, password, and two-factor authentication. Now the attacker has those credentials. It's as old as the pen testing book, going back 25, 30 years ago, right? We can mess with the attacker. You see, what you do is you take the JavaScript that you see here and you insert it on your page, okay? You insert it on your page that has a user ID, password, and a two-factor authentication pin. And it sits there. And if you look at it, it says if the document domain is not thinkist.com. That means if the domain that it's setting up is anything other than thinkist.com, then I want you to get, we got location href, document references, new image, and it references the image that's stored on one of your servers. This example, it's from Canary Token Server. So it basically points to that specific image. What's really cool about this is when the attacker stands that server up, it will reach back, try to grab that image, And as soon as it grabs that image, it will alert you where that system is so that you can start blacklisting or deny listing that IP address before they even send a single email into your organization. This, folks, right here, this is cyber threat intelligence. Not trying to detect or go off of an attack that happened a week ago, a month ago, but an attack against what's happening against your organization right now. Trigger pops up. You can see the HTTP request. You can see the callback that somebody was trying to access this particular and clone this particular page. And we know that this works because at Black Hills Information Security, got this weird fly bug thing. At Black Hills Information Security, we have this set up, landing on my head. It's all over. Dang it. It's a very excited, I don't know, mosquito. So we set this up because Black Hills Information Security is under attack quite a bit by some very advanced attackers, and we get constant attacks, and we're able to deny list those IP addresses and alert on where those IP addresses are before they even launch an attack at our organization. That's powerful. Very, very powerful to do. So, all right, Word documents. Word documents. So with Word documents, we have documents that we can actually put in position where the attacker is going to be. So we can put it on a file share, and we can wait for the attacker to gain access to a workstation and then start looking for files that have the word password in them. And when they do, we'll basically be able to alert exactly where that attacker actually is. So there's some fun things that we can do with this. So back at the last DerbyCon, I missed DerbyCon horribly, and I know a lot of you do too. At the last DerbyCon, I was sharing a room with my brother. My brother's the director of sales at Black Hills Information Security. And one of the cool things about sharing a room with my brother, one, he doesn't snore. But the other thing is I can torment him just like I did when we were kids. So I basically had this document. I was testing something out. I wanted to see if it actually worked. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I sent him this email. I'm like, Brian. He's like, what? I'm like, hey, check your email and open the document I just sent you. He goes, am I having a nightmare? Yes. Open the document. Come on, Brian, come on. And he's like, God, just go back to sleep. So we wrestled a little bit. Hotel security showed up. They're like, what's going on here? I'm like, we're brothers. They're like, carry on. And eventually he opened up his computer and he saw this document and he's like, this document looks creepy. I don't think I should open this document. I'm like, open the document, Brian. So he did. So when he opened this document, it made a callback. In and of itself, not that interesting. Whenever you're talking about geolocation based on IP address, it's kind of garbage. So we were way up here in downtown Louisville in one of the main hotels, and the document put the location of my brother opening that document, that callback in the middle of Louisville. That doesn't help me. I'm not going to be able to find him. Why? Why does this suck so bad? Turns out there's a very good reason. Whenever you're an internet service provider, many times you have pools of IP addresses that you hand out to your customers. These would be your DHCP leases. So you'd have pools of customers with DHCP IP address leases. You're not even going to bother doing geolocation on those IP addresses because those users are going to be all over the place. It's going to change. Why bother dealing with that? So this looks like it's worthless. It looks like it's a dead end. However, to the rescue comes traceroute. You see, with the traceroute utility, you can actually trace to the actual IP address that opened up that document, which is usually the edge router for the user that actually opened that document. It's not like they're a host computer with an RC 1918 IP address. It's their edge router. And you can see down here at the bottom, the 74.143.15.100, that's the IP address of the source that made the callback for the callback on the Word document. That's not the system I'm interested in. Believe it or not, that system's worthless to me. The system that's interesting to me is the one step back. The one that's 74.142.115.130. That computer system is incredibly interesting to me. The reason why is internet service providers, they may not be very good at geolocating their pool of DHCP IP addresses, but they tend to be a lot better at doing geolocation on their infrastructure routing and their points of presence in various neighborhoods, because it gives them the ability to easily troubleshoot the location of those points of presence whenever systems go down. And it turns out, in this scenario, it put us within half a block of where my brother and I were. Now that is much better than just being Louisville. Now you can say Louisville on this specific street. That's cyber threat intelligence. Not only that we're being attacked by said IP address, but we can actually go through, and that is one ugly bug. And now he's dead. All right. So now we can get down to the point where we can say, not only is this an IP address that's trying to attack us, but this is the actual block the attacker is on. That's cool. That's really cool. But the technique that I just talked about, that doesn't work as well whenever you're dealing with Linux documents. When you're looking at Canary tokens, their documents, they do okay, right? And they work great on Microsoft Word. But as soon as you move off to like LibreOffice or AbiWord or any of those different utilities, then at that point, it's less effective, because a lot of those editors don't work with the way that Microsoft Word does it in that specific instance. However, you can insert straight HTML into the core of a file. Let me actually show you what this looks like. Let's go back to ADHD. Okay. And I'm going to open up a new command prompt here. I got to jump over here. Got to open up a new terminal. There we go. All right, I'm going to cd and opt webbug server ls. Now this one document in here, webbug.doc, let me get my IP address 129, and let's go less, and webbug.doc. There we go. All right, awesome. So this is actually opening up this document with less, and I could have used VI, I could have used Nano if I hated myself. There's a bunch of different text editors I could have used, but I'm just looking at it. So if you look at it, it says HTML, we have head, we have an href referencing this local IP address, and then the web server index.php, and it says you're looking for a cascading style sheet. That's how the page is actually laid out. And then the image source tag down here, we're actually referencing a 1 pixel by 1 pixel image as well. So if we were to copy this over, if we were to copy this over to var www, if we were to copy it here, I could easily copy that over to my Windows computer system. Let me get the right IP address. Oops. I don't know why I'm watching this presentation. The guy can't even copy and paste. All right, and I can go to, there we go, this. There we go. I've just downloaded the WebBug, and if I open it in Microsoft Word, I don't actually see the HTML. It just basically shows me what a buggy document, which if we look at our text inside of that document, here you can actually see the text directly inside of this document. It says what a buggy document. All right, so that's pretty easy to work with. So it's simple, and the coolest thing about it is it actually works with a wide variety of different editors beyond just your standard Microsoft Word. So if I go back, let me go back to it here. There we go. I can go AbiWord. And it's going to throw an error. It's going to say, oh, this document doesn't seem to be legit. Doesn't matter, because either way, it actually did the attribution. So if I want to, I can go in here and add minor, and I can look at the connections that came off. And what is it? WebBug user. Okay, let's go WebBug user. Password is ADHD. There we go. I logged in, and I can look at the requests And here's the actual data that called back. All right. So you can see that I had Microsoft Word made a connection. This is Obby Word from my class. Microsoft Word made a connection today, and then this is Obby Word. So it allows us to create a document that is far more effective than just using what WebBug server, or excuse me, what Canary token server gives us. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying it's just a different way and a different utility. We can actually get different operating systems fairly easily, which I think is awesome. All right, so one step forward. Let's continue with this whole trying to put the proper cyber deception in the pathways of where an attacker would actually go. So Javelin is a Symantec company that creates Honey user accounts and Honey workstations. One of the problems with these accounts is they're pretty easy to identify, at least they were. I haven't seen it recently, because it set the last logon time to January 1st, 1601. I know it says December 31st, 1600, but remember epoch time, work your way backwards. But at any rate, the real date is January 1st, 1601, UTOC time. So that's okay, I guess, and they charge money for it, I guess, but you can actually do this for free, which is really, really cool. So how you would do this is you would create an account in your environment. And I created the account just admin ADM administrator. You can name it whatever you want. I just named it an administrator account for a couple of reasons. Some people are like, well, we want to make sure that the attacker hits it, so let's call it an administrator account. Doesn't matter. The attacker's not going to download hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of user accounts, go through them and say, admin ADM administrator, this one pleases me. It's not how this is going to work, right? The attackers, whenever they do a password spray, they're going to hit every single account with the same password. So it'll work no matter what. So this is important. You're going to create the account. Then after you have created that account, you're going to log in to update that last login time from January 1st, 1601. And then you're going to go into its logon hours and you're going to wipe out all the login hours. So you're disabling the account without technically disabling the account, because tools like domain password spray will automatically identify the domains that are basically, identify the accounts that are officially disabled. We want the attacker to actually come in and hit this account. So we disable it by wiping out its login hours. I would also recommend giving it a really crazy long password as well. Then when they hit it, have a similar. Next thing you can do, Kerber roasting. We actually have a toolkit that we've released called the Cred Defense Toolkit. And the Cred Defense Toolkit has password that you can update your password complexity in your domain. It also has the ability to detect link local multicast name resolution attacks. It has the ability to detect Kerber roasting and feed like bad data back to the attacker. So once again, we're putting this where the attacker actually goes. Because one of the first things an attacker is going to do is they're going to try to do a password spray. One of the next things they're going to do is they're going to see if there's Kerber roastable accounts. Now, if you actually look at the service principal name, the Kerber roast account will actually reference the system that it logs into. You can make that a honeypot as well. You're just making your network a nightmare, and it's not hard to do. So with this, as soon as somebody tries to hit that Kerber roastable account, you can have it pop up an email and say, hey, this is a high priority alert. Someone's trying to hit the systems or service account, and this is not something your normal user population will ever do under any circumstances. At that point, you've got them dead to rights. And we love adding this to our reports at Black Hills Information Security. It's one of our all-time favorites. If you ever get a report from us and we put this in, I cry, my pen testers cry, I collect their tears, I brew it, it makes the best wine. So with this, it says effective use of traps. Multiple hosts on the domain were installed as traps. Activities conducted by BHIS revealed that these traps were vulnerable to multiple insecurities and they made tempting targets. Any interaction with these hosts triggered alerts to the customer, and those were reported to BHIS during the test. That is great, folks. And trust me, this matters. Like when you're pen testing an organization that has a bunch of cyber deception, it makes your life miserable, but in that really good way that deep down, you know, you're growing as a human being. All right, Honey Badger. So do I actually go through, let's actually go through Honey Badger. All right, so this is Honey Badger 3. This is the newest version of Honey Badger. And this particular version is a little bit different. We're adding in a couple of features and how it actually works. I want to do a workflow of two different things that you can do with Honey Badger. First things first, whenever you create a target, you're going to create a target. And I want you to think of these as like workflows. So if you're using Honey Badger and you're using it for multiple different types of engagements, you would want to create a different GUID or a different target for each one of those engagements. If you're doing engagement as part of incident response, you would basically call it an IR engagement with a specific GUID. I just created one called Secure West Virginia or Secure WV. And I've got a couple of options on how I can do it. I'm going to show the first two, where I can generate a macro and I can generate vb.net. Now I need to make sure that my Windows virtual machine is up and running. There we go. That looks good to me. Awesome. There's my mono. Great. All right. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a vb.net executable, and this will allow me to create an actual real little program. All right. So I want to create a straight up executable utilizing this particular code. And I want the system that runs it to beacon back and give me its location. All right. So I generate this code and then I go over to my Windows system and I'm going to open up a new document here. Sorry, it's a little bit hard to see, but what this is going to do is it's going to basically do a wireless site survey. Let me show you what that looks like here. Wow, that's not what I wanted. I want this one. There we go. Uh-oh. Oh, crap, wrong system. Hold on. I have Windows systems within Windows systems. There we go. This should be better. All right. All right. So what happens is it fires and it basically says, okay, I want to see all the wireless networks that are available and I want to see their BSS IDs and I want to see the signal attenuation for each of those. What Honey Badger is going to do is it's going to take that data and it's going to upload it to Google, and then Google is going to give us the geolocation on exactly where this particular computer system is. So that's the code, and that's what it does right here. So now let's go File, and let's go Save As, and I'm going to save it in Tools. I'm going to call it SecWV. Oh, I should have saved it as SecWV.vb. Hold on, File. Sorry, if it's small for you, it's small for me too. I'm sorry. There we go. All right, so now let's save it there. Now I'm going to go into Mono, and I'm going to run the, we'll go Mono, oh, not Mono, it's a VBC, Visual Basic Compiler, and we're going to compile tools, secwv.vb, compiles it. There we go. And now that I have it on my VM, I have to move it over a system that actually has a wireless adapter. So I'm going to do that really quick. Let's go to this PC. Let's go to the hard drive. Let's go to Windows. System 32 is where Mono saves it, unfortunately. And switch it to date modified, and then pull the executable over to my desktop. All right. Now, when I run this, does a quick pop-up, then it goes away. So what happened whenever it did this is on the back end, if I go here, go back to map, you can see SecWV. Let me shut off these other ones. Actually fired. Enhance. So you feel like you're like the CIA tracking an attacker when you can actually zoom in on the attacker. Now, the reason why we choose an executable is an executable is portable. You can actually take this executable, you can move it into a Word document, you can I'm going to show you how to put the same code inside of an Excel spreadsheet here in just a second. But you can basically make it so you can move it to just about anything you want to insert it into. It's just really, really, really flexible. You can even merge two executables together. And when you merge the two executables together, you can have one executable fire and the other executable is just the other one that runs as kind of like a parasite process. So this is right where my office is. So that's good squishy. That's cyber threat intelligence, folks. So that's neat. Let me show you the other one. Let's go to targets. Let's go to Sec West Virginia, and I'm going to grab macro. And I am going to grab this code. And what we're going to do is I'm instead going to start a Excel spreadsheet. So let me open up Excel here. All right. So we'll open up a blank workbook. Now you need to add in the developer ribbon, whatever, the developer tab on the ribbon. And to do that, you would right click anywhere on your ribbon up here, your work bar, you go configure ribbon, and you make sure that developer is selected, okay? Because we want to insert a macro here. So now you go to macros, and we'll call our macro Honey Badger, like so. And I want to set this to this workbook, okay? We create it, and I can take this and I can change this instead of auto open. We're going to change that to workbook open. And then I can run this and just show you how it fires. So there we go. It's fired there. And if I go back to Honey Badger, you're not going to see the target. It's going to be the exact same pin on the exact same thing, but I can show you beacons here. If we go down to the bottom, you can see that this is the first one I fired. That was the executable latitude and longitude. And then this is the one that I just fired from the Excel spreadsheet, latitude and longitude. So very easy to use. Once again, the way that you would do this is you would set this up and you would put it on a file share somewhere where you think an attacker would get, and you would call it like, you know, routing numbers or passwords or social security numbers or something. And you would put it on a file share that your general user population probably wouldn't see, but an attacker that's going through automatically searching for files would. So that's how that would work. Now let me show you a word of caution on this one. Here's the word of caution. So this fired for me and it ran just great, and that's awesome. There is no obfuscation whatsoever in this. Not at all. This is just the straight raw code. If you want this to actually fire, you're going to have to send it through a VB obfuscation utility, or you can convert it into an executable and then convert it back into a VB script and then insert it. Because if you don't, if you just keep this code exactly as it's set here, if I save it as a macro enabled workbook, call it nope, it's going to generate an alert here in a second. Great. I guess it didn't. Well, that sucks. Yeah, well, I guess that's that. It should have generated an alert from Defender down here, popping up and saying, hey, malware. It didn't. So I guess that part of my demo failed in a cool way, I guess. So yay, one for bypassing AMSI? Whatever. All right. So, all right, it should have thrown, and it should have absolutely have thrown a Defender alert, but it didn't. So what I'd recommend to you is with this, send it through an obfuscation utility before you actually load it into a spreadsheet, because it can create problems with antivirus detections, except whenever I'm trying, I literally just failed at failing. Like I go into this demo expecting, hey, we're gonna fail this little thing, and it didn't fail at all, which sucks because I wanted to show you it failing, but it didn't. All right, so bummer. So this is updated. Here's the instructions to compile it, and then the results. This is whenever I ran it at DerbyCon for the last presentation that I ever did there, and probably will ever do there. And it's funny because it said its accuracy was 77 meters. And I'll have people in the military from time to time look at that and go, close enough. like for, oh my God, so it depends on what you're doing with horseshoes, hand grenades, and carpet bombing possibly. And this is where you get it. We'll be getting these slides out. It should be in the Discord channel for everybody. So you can basically pull Honey Badger down and play with it. It's also in ADHD, in the Active Defense Harbinger distribution as well. It's all set up there and ready to rock. You will need some API keys. It's at the beginning of the instructions. You'll need to get those API keys to make the maps actually fire properly. So this is us running an earlier version of Honey Badger. Thankfully, Google hasn't updated its map in a long time. But we spent 2 weeks at a bank, and it was kind of funny because the bank in Germany didn't think that it was going to, it didn't think that this was going to work. And we had over 250 hits with Honey Badger. And they went back and they checked and cross-referenced all of these different ASN numbers for these hits. And they were able to find, it was like 3 or 4 systems that were compromised, that were connecting back, beaconing back to these particular computer systems or to these network ranges. And they were able to find compromised computers. Once again, folks, this is threat intelligence. This is threat intelligence here. This is not like something that's on the fringe of security. This is not something that Brian Krebs would be like, do everything else first. This works. Standard threat intelligence and just ingesting feeds on hashes, IP addresses, and URLs, that doesn't stop an advanced attacker. This absolutely will stop an advanced attacker, and it will help you. And also, this makes security fun again. I mean, this is what we thought computer security was going to be, right? We thought we would be tracking hackers through cyberspace. We'd be hunting them down. And it turns out that what we ended up doing was a lot of audit and compliance and dealing with spreadsheets. And that sucks, because the more time we spend on those things, the less time we actually get to spend working with real, actual, honest to God security in our networks. But this is fun, and this works. So can we let go of some of the crap that doesn't work? Or more accurately, the way I look at active defense is not a replacement for traditional security defenses, but it's helping us begin to fill in those gaps that exist in those defenses, understanding that there are in fact limitations as well. So how do we use this for threat intel? So here's an email from Kent a couple of years ago. He said, John, I didn't think we'd think much of these on their own. However, they all seem to be geographically correlated, and we figured we should let you know in the event you want to provide a specific directive. This is what we've seen in the last 4 weeks. We've seen targeted phishing originating from IPv6 addresses out of the Netherlands, targeted network scanning on Rapid City from the same network range, BHIS, Doppel DNS, dynamic DNS pointed to an IP address. A recent Canary token hit in webmail from their address range. GoDaddy CDN is blocking an unusually high amount of connections. CJ is getting phone calls from Antwerp. Using cyber deception and proper monitoring, we were able to correlate all these things back. And I went on to Twitter, because what are you going to do? So I went on Twitter and I said, hey, if you're trying to attack our network from these ranges, please stop. We see you. And I got a direct message from like a disposable account. I don't know if it's the real attackers or not, but they said, how the hell did you know that we were doing that? It's all about visibility. It's all about how we change the way we look at security. And it's about augmenting the different things that are missing in computer security as well. So the final one I wanted to talk about from MITRE is network analysis. Another part that is so incredibly important to everything that we do at Black Hills Information Security and active countermeasures. So active countermeasures, we have a tool called AI Hunter. We're changing the name to AC Hunter. AI was a joke. It was actual intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. Turns out there's a whole mess of people that see AI and they just aren't interested in touching a product. But it's going to be called AC Hunter. Rebranding it here shortly. But MITRE added in network analysis for detecting attacks that in the 2 columns for data exfiltration and command and control that none of your existing security technologies are detecting. Wow. Let's not do that. That's weird. What am I? Hold on. I'm probably getting a spam mail right now. fix that. All right. So network monitoring is absolutely essential to what we do and how we defend our networks. And the reason why we got into network monitoring is because we had a wide number of customers, almost all of them, that couldn't detect any of our command and control whenever we were doing a pen test. So we created RITA, Real Intelligence Threat Analytics. And what RITA does is it detects beacons in your environment. It'll detect fast beacons, slow beacons. It'll detect even beacons that are using variants, if they're using jitter. If you're using Cobalt Strike malleable C2 profiles, you set it at 10-second intervals plus or minus 20 seconds, we can still detect that with jitter. It does all kinds of things. It checks existing internet blacklists. It'll check long connections. It'll do DNS lookups looking for a high number of DNS resolved subdomains or hosts, indications of attacks that are using command and control that are using DNS, like the Ryuk botnet that got the news last week because of attacking hospitals. It's free. It is absolutely free. So if you go to RITA Active Countermeasures, click download, takes you to our GitHub repository, and we're updating it constantly. And this is important to me for a lot of reasons. This is easy to install. It'll automatically install Zeek. It'll automatically install RITA. You're off to the races. Automatic installer script works like a champ on a wide variety of different operating systems. So there's really no excuse for you to not run this. Set it up on a system with a good network card, set it up on a system with good CPU and good memory, and you're gonna get some amazing things. It is fast. Unless your network is like, 50 gigs per second or higher. Actually, RITA can handle that too, just fine. Just give it enough CPU and memory and RITA is gonna tear through it. But it's just like everything, you're gonna need a big boat. We had one customer that was running a 100 gig network. RITA had trouble with that. It had trouble dealing with that. It was actually taking as long to process the data as it was for the data to come through. So it was definitely taking a while. But on the vast majority, like 99.9% of the networks, RITA is going to rock it. It's written in Golang, it's fast, it's multi-threaded, it just ticks. Now, the other thing about this, as I mentioned, this is free. And at Black Hills Information Security, we have put a tremendous amount of effort into this product over the years. We have our own dev team working it. Now, we do have a commercial product, absolutely. We do have a commercial project associated with it. But the heart and soul of the commercial project is in RITA. It's very similar to Snort and Cisco Firepower, where Snort, if you know how to use it, you can stand up an intrusion detection system on your own, easy peasy. But if you want a GUI, you want alerting, you want tracking, you want visualizations, you're gonna end up purchasing a product. So really AC Hunter is really the visualization, alerting, and correlation engine for RITA. So why is this free? And why is it named RITA? I didn't name it. It was named after my mother. So when we started RITA, my mom was kind of the CFO of Black Hills Information Security. And I would fly down to Phoenix, Arizona to Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And I would sit out in the hallway while she was sleeping, doing her treatments and stuff, or before her treatments. And once she comes out, she sits down in the hallway with me while I'm doing a webcast, very similar to this one. And people saw her come on camera. They asked how she was doing. She was talking about status of what she was doing with her cancer treatment and everything. And there was like 1,000 people that were giving her well wishes. And she asked that this product stay free for the community. And her logic was, the community has been so good to Black Hills Information Security that this is absolutely something that we need to give back. At Black Hills Information Security, one of our mottos is proudly sucking at capitalism. And I need to clarify what that means, because a lot of people will be like, well, they're socialists. No, I'm not. I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist. But if you look at traditional capitalism, it's all about trying to squeeze as much money out of something as you can possibly do. And I'm telling you, that is not true. If you want to be successful in business, don't watch Wall Street. Don't watch movies and things that are greed is good. Don't watch Shark Tank or Swimming with Sharks or Boiler Room or any of those things. That's garbage. My mom knew, and I knew, that the more you give back to the community you work in, the more that community gives back to you. So by releasing this tool that we put like $3 million into over the past 4 years, by releasing games that we break even on, backdoors and breaches. Jason and I were talking about this today. We break even on every box that we sell. We are not out to make a profit. And this was the #1 selling educational game on Amazon for a few days. We could have made a lot of money off it, but we didn't. Our t-shirts that we're selling in our Spearfish General store, we're trying to break even, folks. These webcasts that we do, the training that we do, all of it gives back to this company. And Rita is a huge part of that. My mom was a huge part of that. Now, unfortunately, she did pass away from pancreatic cancer, but it is something that's important to us in ADHD, in Honey Badger, in Rita. And if you look at the people at Black Hills Information Security, if you look at the people at Trusted Sec, if you look at the people at Rendition, you're going to find a theme through a whole bunch of great pen testing firms. And I didn't mention all of them, right? I could have gone to Secure Ideas and Guardians and all these different firms. You have a tremendous number of groups and firms out there who are giving back to the community. And the people and the organizers that are putting this conference together, they're giving back to the community. So I ask you this, as we started this entire conversation, there was a lot of talk of InfoSec burnout and burnout being on Twitter and burnout in conversations that we have dealing with politics and everything. I ask you, don't get burned out. Please continue giving back, because amazing, wonderful things will happen to you when you do. So I'd like to open it up for any questions that people have. I actually don't have the Discord channel up and running. Once again, if somebody could put the Discord channel up in chat on GoToWebinar so I can actually jump into it, I would appreciate it. Maybe, is it on our Discord channel? Come on over here. I don't see where we are. All right. So like I said, I wanted to throw it back to the folks that are putting on the conference. Let me stop sharing my screen. And like I said, I want to open this up to questions, and I'm not getting the Discord link.
Sorry, John.
Yeah.
There were a couple of questions in the Discord.
Sure, let's do it.
One of the first ones that I saw was, can you use the Canary tokens and some of that for insider threat? And I believe you can, but I wanted to get your input on that.
Yes, you can. Just give me a second. Let me open up a different slide deck here real quick. I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm opening up a different slide deck. Just give me.
Well, and while you do that, I think I was at the DerbyCon where you released Rita, and it was one of my first interactions with that, and it was amazing.
It was funny when we first. Yeah, the first iteration of Rita was running in Elastic, and it was on Elk, and it was written in Python. It was very, very, very slow. It's now, I think it's like 1,000 times faster, but that was a great DerbyCon. That was actually the DerbyCon that they set our booth up at BHIS directly across from Symantec's. And Symantec, the guy at Symantec kept on saying, yeah, our endpoint antivirus is unhackable. No one can bypass it. I leave it to any of the so-called hackers here to try to bypass our antivirus. And in Guardians, I remember Jay Beal was there. We sat down and we bypassed the antivirus. Took us like 10 minutes to do. And then we created a loop where we were bypassing the product he was talking about every 5 minutes. So that was a lot of fun. That was a great DerbyCon. But the answer is, what's that?
Thanks not to ever say unhackable.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, if we're going to talk about the thing that you should not do ever, you should never go to a hacker conference and basically say, you know, we're unhackable. That's just a bad life choice for anybody in marketing at all. So, okay, so I'm opening up a different deck. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So for detecting the insider, so the way that you would detect an insider is you can do a honey share and a honey doc. All right. So if you're looking at Edward Snowden, if you're looking at a number of different types of attackers that are insiders, they're usually looking for those sensitive documents. So what you do is you create your Word web bug, just like I talked about and showed you. Then you would be using in Packet to create your share. Now you can do the same thing with logging, file and directory logging in Active Directory and on Windows, but you can also do it in Packet as well. So we move our document over, and then we start in Packet. In this situation, it's the ./SMB server. Comment is secret super, secret, and then we're basically sharing out the directory secret super. And what happens whenever the insider opens the document, then in Packet also logs the IP address, host name, username, and the net NTLM v2 hash for the user that's actually accessing the files on that share. So hopefully that answered your question. Any other questions? You said that there was a couple of questions.
Yeah, I'm looking through the Discord now, and there was a comment that I had actually made about countermeasures leading to countermeasures, right? So you start dropping canary tokens. How does the attacker start cloning files into disconnected networks and whatnot? But I don't know.
So this is really cool, all right? So this is awesome, because what you're talking about is you're talking about fundamentally changing the behavior of the attacker. Right. And that is ultimately what we're after with active countermeasures. So anytime you have someone that's like, well, you know, if I found that there was this document, I would start opening it in all these other different places. I'm okay with that. It's kind of like a claymore. It's basically, let's use a bear trap. Let's say I have a bear trap in my house and someone comes in, they're like, yeah, dude, as soon as I step into that bear trap, then I could totally avoid the bear trap. It doesn't matter. You already stepped into the damn bear trap. So they're going to trigger that canary token. And we see that with Honey Badger. Once somebody knows that there's a beacon, it's like, oops, we've been caught. They try to flood the Honey Badger server with millions of bogus locations, but we nailed them on the first time that they did it. So it's cool because we're changing the attacker's behavior. Right. And that's exactly what we need to do. We can't be like, let's stick with sucky defenses because we don't want the attackers to get better. We just can't do that.
Right. No, I think that's a good point. And you bring up, this is actual threat intelligence. I do a bunch of threat intelligence with other organizations. It's not really intelligence. It's more like archaeology. We're digging through logs.
I like that. And there is some intelligence in archaeology, right? I mean, there is. You do learn. But it's not like you can read what the Egyptians did and you can apply that to how to fix your Honda Accord, right? It's just, there's lessons to be learned from overall engineering principles, like, you know, angle of repose and things like that, but it's not exactly going to be useful for you building your home. There's things to be learned. It's additive, but for actually defending against specific attackers, not so much.
No, and I think it's a great point. And the tools, as you said, giving back to our community, I think helps us not burn out.
Yes,
and teaching.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. It can go the other way. We have a couple developers, Bradley and Justin. We've got a ton that they get into giving back, and they're like working BHIS, and then they spend way too much time on open source projects. So we have to give them time to work on those projects because it is easy to get burnt out. Marcello is a great example. Pipe leader. He's working his day job at BHIS, and he's releasing CrackMap Exec, Death Star, Silent Trinity, all of these different tools. And it takes its toll after a while. And as a community, we tend not to treat people real well. They're like, hey, there's a bug in CrackMap Exec. Get off your ass and fix it. It's like, oh, we need to be nicer to people that are giving free stuff out.
Yeah, and I learned, I was in Marcello's stream. Actually, that's a funny story. They invited me instead of you.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, Jason invited me by accident. So, but I had actually watched Marcello's first stream and I figured out what I was doing wrong with Python libraries because I was using 2 different managers.
Dude, we don't get a lot of people attending those. It's a good number, but there's so many people like that webcast just saved me weeks of time. And it's funny because if you look at it, it's Marcello wasted weeks of time and he's sharing what he did so you don't have to.
That's absolutely. Your slides are in the Discord for anybody who wants to download those. John, I will, unless you have anything else, sir, I will let you go. We absolutely appreciate your keynote and all the knowledge you share and all the give back that you do to this community.
That's what it's all about. All right. Well, thank you so much. You all have a great rest of the conference. Talk to you all later.
You too, sir.